quality education. And I know I'm in a room full of educators, this is an easy one, right? Everyone's like, yes, of course it should be 12 years. Frankly, it should be more. It should include graduate school and art programs, right? Business school, let's do it, right? But what many people don't know is that in the year 2000, all the world's leaders gathered and agreed what their ambition was going to be for girls around the world. How many years of education do they have a human right to have? And the answer that they came up with was a terrible number. Does anyone know the number? 6. 6 years. That was the global ambition for girls. So when I started work at the Malala Fund, the world's leaders were gathering again. It was 2015. They were putting together the most regrettably branded goals ever, the Sustainable Development Goals, if you've heard of them, the global goals, right? And there was discussion among world leaders, and the consensus was that by 2030, maybe, we could agree to the number 9. That by 2030, girls had a human right to 9 years of education. And this was incomprehensible to us. I mean, can you imagine what your life would look like after 9 years of education if the school gate was closed to you? Like, who would you be? Who would your students be if that's all their hopes and potential and dreams just stopped, or just stopped after 9 years? So we decided we would fight. We were going to fight for a different number, and the number was 12. 12 years of education for every girl, and we met with parliaments, and we met with all the politicians, and we released reports, right? And we built the modeling spreadsheets, all the things you teach your students to do. We ran the numbers, we did the work. We did the work. But for me, one of the greatest moments in that work was actually this moment. So this is Malala speaking at the United Nations. As you can see in the headline, she spoke after Pope Francis and Shakira. Not a speaking slot I honestly ever imagined I would have any role or any part in. But I remember standing at the back of the room during the speech at the UN. I was exhausted. It was hot. I had on my UN-worthy clothes. Journalists were stepping on me because it was really crowded. And all I could think about was how in the hell we're going to get through the rest of the schedule for the summit. Like, my mind was already so far ahead because, I mean, have you ever been in the work and you're just not present? You're just trying to get through? Just me? I'm the only one that's ever been there. Come on, hands up, hands up. All right. But for me, this was one of the greatest moments because when Malala stood up in the General Assembly on the floor of the UN, a room I never thought I would be in, surrounded by presidents and prime ministers and by other young people and students up here in the balcony, we were celebrating that we had won this fight. The 12 years had been codified in these new goals that instead of 6 or 9, it was going to be 12. And it was this huge moment that we really lifted this global ambition, right? For education and belief in girls living in the world's poorest countries and circumstances. This was now going to be their human right. But the most important people to me in that room were not the presidents and world leaders. They were these 2 girls standing on the side of Malala on her left and her right. So there's a photo I just wanted to punch in a little bit so you can see them more clearly. So the girl on the left, her name is Salam. We met her visiting schools in Lebanon. She's a Syrian refugee. She was fighting for her education every day, not in a removed way. It's really easy to talk about policy, but in a personal way. This was her life and her future. She was fighting for it. Under impossible circumstances, we got her to New York. It is really hard. It's only got harder to travel on a Syrian passport. I actually had the International Red Cross tell me never to call them again because I got them to issue emergency papers. If someone's actually having a health emergency and going to die, you can get emergency papers if you're not allowed to travel. We got our papers and they said, never call us again. Anyway, so fine. I was like, I'm definitely calling you again, but thank you so much. So she was there. And then the girl standing on the other side of Malala to the right, her name is Amina, and she's from Kaduna State in Nigeria, which is where Boko Haram abducted and continues to abduct thousands of girls. We all remember the Bring Back Our Girls campaign? That's her community. So she and girls like her went to informal schools that we funded at the Malala Fund and were under threat of violence every single day simply for just wanting their education. So they were not just a number, like they were the calling for me that day. That the highest level leaders in this room would have to see them, right? That it would not be in your name but without you. Doesn't that happen all the time in international work? We think that we're carrying the torch for someone else. Why aren't they there? Why haven't we brought them into the room with us, pulled them in, if we need to? I wanted leaders to see them, and they had to be present. They had to be present to do that. We couldn't just talk about them. They had to be present. I wanted them to promise that they would use their power to change things, that they would look at them and promise an education to all refugee children, right? That wars wouldn't stop them from learning. We wanted to promise these girls who were abducted by Boko Haram that they would be brought back and that all girls could someday study in safety. So that moment to me was about why we can't confuse the cause, right? And and why the cause exists in the first place. It's so easy to get disconnected. It is always about people.